much, Michelle. It is a total honor and privilege to be here this evening as part of the VSU series. It's been great to be in partnership with VSU colleagues, Dr. Corley, Dr. Walter, I see Dr. Johnson on there and others, and really appreciate being able to be a part of this work. I'm really thankful that there's this opportunity tonight to have a dialogue about what schools can be. There's so much out there about return to normal, or what's it going to look like to kind of catch up from where we were. And this is such, at the same time that we've had so many tragic things going on, this is also a time, one of those little places in time where there is opportunity to reshape things. And I think it would be a tragedy if we let that slip by. So I am so excited that we have some amazing panelists for you this evening. I'm going to turn over to them in just a moment. Let me just have them kind of wave as we go through. First, we have Kaleb Rashad. Kaleb, if you give us a wave there. So Kaleb, and we've had the privilege in Hopewell to work with High Tech High out of California for some of the work we're trying to do as a division to sort of rethink and reshape what we do for education. And Kaleb can tell a little bit more about himself, but he's the director of creative leadership. He has been a principal, a leader in multiple schools. We have Liz Kleinrock. Liz is a teacher. She's out of DC, and she's been on a TED Talk. She has been an anti-biased, anti-racist trainer and leader. I got to know Liz for the first time just before COVID started, when she was doing a training in Richmond for a number of our staff. And we have Nikki Hinostro, and Nikki also in California with High Tech High. Nikki has helped found and lead multiple schools for a variety of ages, and is with the High Tech High Graduate School of Education, also helping in the same work of developing leaders. So we welcome the panelists. We are so thankful for everybody who's here. And I first just want to give panelists a moment to tell a little bit why they're here. And so we'll kind of go back to Kaleb of what kind of brings you to this space this evening around how we may be able to kind of rethink or reinvent schools.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jay, for having me. I know it's 6:30 there in Virginia, and I appreciate everyone just showing up after work and after taking care of all the other responsibilities that you've got. And I want to just like give a little love to all the other panelists that are in this conversation with us. So why am I here? Why I'm in the space? First of all, I am only here because of folks who sacrificed so that I could be here. That is my mother, my grandmother, grandfather, my great-grandma, my great-grandpa, and so many other folks who surrounded them with love and with joy and with resistance in this country to white supremacy culture, patriarchy, and capitalism. And so I feel like I've got a responsibility, frankly, given all that other folks have sacrificed for me. So why am I here? I am down for a dialogue that's about a critical investigation and understanding like of our history, when we could talk about equity if we want. And if we don't like talk about justice, we don't talk about, how this country's history and how its legacy continues to live with us today, we're just gonna be spinning our wheels. And so my purpose of being here is maybe in part, I think about all the folks who've come before me, but in particular, I will lift up Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, way back in the day, right at the turn of the century, around 1905, 1906 to about 1930, they built 5,000 schools together because Black kids in the South could not get an education that they needed or rightfully deserved. Now, they did this in the era of Plessy versus Ferguson. They did this in the era of Birth of a Nation being played in the White House. They did this in the context of Black men and women and children being lynched probably once a week. They did this in the context of eugenics and the sort of racialized Scientology. They did this when it was not easy. They built 5,000, I think 4,719 some odd schools all across the South. So why am I here, fam? To be unapologetic about designing schools for the liberation of all people, but specifically for Black and Brown and Indigenous folks. Because I am not so sure that we can expect these systems of oppression to be our sources of healing. The greatest weapon we know in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And if you look at what the United Daughters of the Confederacy did in this country, right now we've got 38 senators who signed up to back legislation to be anti-1619. They don't want to tell a full accounting of the history. And I would just suggest, in the way that Malcolm X described it, like, how can you know where you are and where you're going to go if you don't know your roots? You master your history, you master your present and your future. So why am I here? Because I got a responsibility for all those folks who came before me and all those folks who are unborn, who are still yet to come. And my hope is, over the next 25 years of my life, if God would be so willing to allow me to be here for that long, that we can build 5,000 schools that are about the liberation of our people. That's why I'm here.
And so thankful you're here, Kaleb. Liz, tell us a little bit about you being here in our space this evening.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Liz Kleinrock. My pronouns are she and her. This evening, I'm coming to you from unceded Piscataway and Pamunkey land, which is known as Washington, D.C. I've been a classroom teacher for about 12 years. Currently teach 6th grade, but it's actually my first year in middle school. I've taught 1st through now 6th grades over my teaching career. So I've done the spectrum of elementary school, although my former principal liked to joke, like, you haven't done kindergarten, like there's still time to, like, get that last grade level in, but oh gosh, they're so small. I have so much respect for early childhood and kindergarten teachers. What brings me to this work, I really love this quote from Norton Juster, that there are so many things that are possible just as long as you don't know they're impossible. And I was extremely fortunate when I was just entering my teaching career to be placed with a mentor teacher who won the Teaching Tolerance Award a couple of years before I was in his classroom, but who lived and breathed social justice and anti-bias and anti-racist work into every aspect of our curriculum. Like, he brought it into science and social studies and math and reading and writing. And so when I would attend conferences or even just talk to other people in my teaching program, I constantly heard adults saying that kids weren't ready, they're not capable, it's too complex, it's just too much. And it was so wild to hear adults saying those things, because I was in a classroom setting where those things were happening every single day. And I had all this concrete evidence that students were engaged. They were honestly more engaged in that content than in like very traditional methods of teaching in the way that math and reading and writing are typically taught. So for me, I was very lucky, because once I started there, I took off and I never looked back. And having the privilege to informally loop with a group of students from 2nd to 3rd to 4th grade and just building on our curriculum and building on topics of conversation, seeing how eager they were and how easily they were able to apply what we were learning in class to the outside world and the communities that they were a part of, and just engage with such curiosity. Like, I think in terms of our work in learning and unlearning, there was just less for them to unlearn, but there also wasn't ego, and there also wasn't a lot of fear in talking about race, talking about gender, disabilities, religion, like whatever topic we were covering in class. During this pandemic, we've had such an opportunity to rethink school and to dismantle practices that have not worked. And we have centuries and just so long we've been collecting evidence that this doesn't work. And instead of choosing this as an opportunity to reinvent, to dismantle what hasn't been working, to give students far more autonomy, more ownership, as well as teachers and people who are facing students every day, we have just tried to kind of remold what we've been doing to fit our own comfort. Like, when we're all experiencing collective trauma, and when that happens, we are more likely to go back to what is comfortable and familiar. So I understand it, but it still has been very disappointing. And right now I'm seeing my 6th graders having to deal with all of these projections that adults in the building are putting on them, trying to figure out ways that we're still going to do standardized testing this year, that our end of the year progress reports, like the teacher evaluations that even I have been given, are just like, what is the purpose of any of this? And if we can't very quickly point to the reason why we're doing it, rather than just going through the motions of what's familiar. So passion and also a lot of rage and frustration, like this mix of emotions, are things that bring me to this work, but always trying to come at it from a proactive standpoint. I'm not going to offer criticism without offering something constructive. And I'm just really excited to be in community with all of you this evening. Thank you for having me.
So awesome to have you here, Liz. And I think we all come into this because of some different passions and emotions that are at us. Nikki, welcome to this space as well. Tell us what brings you here tonight.
Well, first of all, 2 incredibly brilliant educators, Dr. Hackney and Dr. McLean, brought me here because they brought me into the work at Hopewell. And I'm just so fortunate to be part of that community and to be treated as family as we've engaged at the Center for Love and Justice with really disrupting systems that haven't worked for us. And I feel so grateful for their trust, for their love, for their family. So that's the first reason why I'm here right now. Why I'm here in this conversation is really about love. I come because our young people deserve to be loved. They deserve to feel love from a deep justice, internal soul way. They deserve to be loved by every person they engage with in schools. And I'm here because my abuelita, my mom, my dad, they taught me how to do that from a very young age. I'm here because my abuelita said to me when I made a tortilla with patting it out, the way she did with her disfigured hands as a very old age, she had the perfect circle and mine looked like the state of Texas. And she said to me, there's no other one like that. That is beautiful, Nicolasa, because she called me Nicolasa. And I am here because she taught me how to show up as uniquely me in a space where not everybody wanted to see who I was, but she did. I'm here because my pops and my brother, 2 Latino boys, were not treated the way they should have been in schools. And I never, ever want young boys, young brown boys, or Black boys, or young any child to feel the way they felt, to be put in closets, told they're not good enough, told they're stupid, because that's truly what happened to my family.
Oops, Nikki,
I'm
accidentally
here
muted.
because
There you
I got you. Yeah, I'm here because there was a border one time made, but before that border existed, my family came across from Mexico, my indigenous people, my Tarahumara, my Yaqui, and brought us into this Kumeyaay land. And so I'm here because I believe that love can truly be the path to justice. And love isn't always soft. Love can be very hard. Love can be sweat and blood. And I believe that we all got to come together to love our young people and show them how brilliant and beautiful they are.
Thank you, Nikki. And I just want to encourage folks to please use our chat too. This is, I think it was said, this is, about family. I think in Hopewell, some of the connections we've had, it's been very much about that. Feel that in this room too. So please fill this chat as we go along too. I can't help but think about the themes each of you talked about being here because of the people before you, before us. And legacies that we continue forward and pay forward. And so we appreciate everybody being in the room as we start to talk about what is possible as we go forward. Michelle, if you can help us, what I want to turn to for a moment is there's a video that was made before COVID that talked about what is school about, what is school for? And it seems to be even more poignant right now when we talk, as Liz mentioned, about that sort of normal, that everybody sort of, when you experience trauma, it's like getting back to what you used to have. And what is this thing we used to have? So if you don't mind queuing that up, Michelle, and then we'll come back. And this is meant to be a dialogue and a conversation, not just three panelists, and want to hear from everybody when we come back.
We can't hear it, Dr. McLean.
Hey, Michelle, are you able to, we don't hear the
fancy diploma
sound.
to sit at home with my mom. But luckily, they did teach me some important skills like factoring trinomials and how mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I'm so happy I remember the Pythagorean theorem because it helped me a lot. Okay, I'm lying. Let me stop. Because all the stuff they taught me, truthfully, I forgot. Mom, remember when you would ask me, what did you learn in school today? And I would say, nothing much. I wasn't being modest. The truth about it, Mom, is I had already forgotten. And it's not just me. Millions of students sing the same song. How many of you guys avoid eye contact with the teacher to try not to get caught upon? Afraid to raise your hand for fear of being wrong, which proves that school isn't an environment for learning or building up the intellect. It's just a game you play for grades and how many A's you can collect. But I guess what do you expect when the most commonly asked question in class is this gonna be on the test? Is this gonna be on the test? See, if school put learning instead of testing and memorizing as the top standard, then the letter F would not stand for failure. It would stand for find another answer. And if school was really interested in our personal and academic success, students would wake up later, have more freedom and homework, a lot less. And that's not my opinion. This conclusion has been scientifically tested and proven. And any teacher that doesn't believe me, feel free to check my works cited page to inspect. Oh, and I did it in MLA format because I know that's all you will accept. See, students would get more benefit from an extra hour of sleep than putting them through the torture of an extra essay, reading 150 pages, doing problems 1 through 60 on the worksheet, and having 3 projects due by the end of the week. Not only is it pointless pain, but it's also deal with it. Because we get so much work, but they don't teach the time management skills to deal with it. See, in school, we are controlled by bells. We have to learn in rooms with the feng shui of a prison cell. We have to ask permission to relieve bodily functions, but not before the teacher asks a million questions like, why didn't you go before class? I'm sorry, my bladder is kind of on its own schedule and it's not always timely. See, teachers always say, use your time wisely, but that never made sense to me. Because these 6 cruel hours of our lives we call school might literally be the worst use of time management ever in history. Think about it, the traditional teaching method is foolish. No, it's useless, multiplied by the square root of stupid. What they do is they cram information in your head, force feeding you, and then you throw it up on the test. That's not education, that's bulimia. And the more bulimic you are, the better you will do on their assessments. So it's no wonder why so many students graduate mentally and emotionally anorexic. See, school teaches you how to memorize dots. True education should teach you how to connect them. True education teaches you how to catch a fish. School teaches you, yeah, you caught the fish, but you didn't show your work, so it doesn't count. Throw it back. I'm just asking, what is school for? It's not education, that's just not true. If you still think that, you might be sniffing glue. See, the word education comes from the Latin root educe, meaning bring out, i.e. bring the gifts out of a person and make them viable. But school doesn't bring out much, it just stuffs more facts inside of you. Now some of that stuff is justifiable. We need reading, writing, and some arithmetic, that's fair. But are you telling me metamorphic and igneous rocks are more important than self-care? If suicide is the third leading cause of death of ages 10 to 24, and Harvard studies suggest the biggest predictor for success is self-control and emotional health, then why the heck aren't we taught how to handle stress, bullies, or rejection? How about anxiety or depression? You know, skills we need for our entire lives. Bro, I don't even know how to cook. I'm honestly surprised I'm still alive. But hey, at least I can name all the battles that happened in the Civil War. Seriously, what is school for? Some say you need it to be successful, and that's something we do not doubt. But do you own a MacBook or iPhone? Did you know they both were created by a dropout? Are you watching this video on Facebook or YouTube? Doesn't matter which you choose, they both were created by dropouts. Ever use Snapchat, WhatsApp, shopped at Whole Foods? Well, thank a dropout. Does your home furniture come from IKEA? Okay, don't get the wrong idea. He was not a dropout. Don't be a fool. I mean, how could he drop out? Ingvar Kamprad, founder of IKEA, never even went to school. I know what you're thinking. He's just picking and choosing. There's millions who didn't go to school that aren't successful. Who is he fooling? And you're right. But open your history books and start perusing. You'll find the very people we idolize in school never really had formal and/or secondary schooling. I'm talking George Washington, Abe Lincoln. America's best presidents had zero school between them. Ben Franklin, Thomas Edison, shall I proceed? Ernest Hemingway, Mark Twain, Teddy Roosevelt, Margaret Mead. Now please, I'm not saying drop out, because some schools are great and many teachers are rare treasures. I'm saying that there's a difference between people who are smart and people who score better. I'm saying that your future is something that no test will ever measure. Even if that test begins in 3 letters like SAT, ACT, it's BS if they say those determine your LIFE. No, your destiny is in your hands. You must shape it to be great. So don't expect school to open doors, because it's more likely to slam them in your face.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Sometimes I wonder about all the dreams lost in school and how much potential goes to waste. If it wasn't for music and YouTube, then I would have been just another lost case. Everybody watching this, please, close your eyes. Imagine a child sitting in the back of some teacher's class in some town. He never raises his hand, he fails most of his classes, but inside of him, there is a passion. And if nurtured and brought out, will lead him to discover the cure for cancer. But you see, I'm afraid that that child's gift will never come out. He will never win the Nobel Prize award because in class he was ignored and his worth was judged only by his scores. So teachers, principals, parents, advisors, and students, I ask one more time, what is school for? Hey guys, what's up? My name is Prince EA, and I want to thank you for watching that video. And now I just have one question left. What is school for? Don't you think it's time that we answer this question together? If you are a teacher, a parent, or a student, I urge you to check out the Innovation Playlist. What is the playlist? It is a program that any school can try for free. It's based on the best practices from educators around the world, and through its small steps, it can lead to big changes in your school. Go to innovationplaylist.org to learn more.
Wow. So some of you may have seen that before. I know I was privileged. It was shown in our district back pre-pandemic, and when it came across whatever feed it was the other day, when you just think of it after Liz talking about our tendency just to go back to where we were before. I just want to ask our panelists to react to this, and we're going to ask all y'all to give us thoughts in a breakout room in just a minute. But where's that taking you? Nikki, Liz, Kaleb, what are your thoughts? Nikki, you went last time. Why don't you go ahead?
All right. So where it takes me in this moment is to think about opportunity, this beautiful mess we're in right now as an opportunity to really ask this question with our teachers and our kids. And what we've had the opportunity to do with Hopewell students is actually ask them what they think about what we've designed for them, so that we're not designing for, but actually with them. And that when they feel like Jaleel did, when we asked him, when his teacher asked him, Jaleel, what do you think about this project? The beautiful moment came when he showed up, turned on his screen for the first time all year. I hope it's okay to use the name, Dr. McLean. I'm not using last names, but it was a beautiful moment because he showed up, because he felt like his voice mattered, and because he was asked specifically, what should we do with this project to make it about us, make it about you? We so often historically have decided that we are going to show up as the stage, as teachers, as principals. I have, as a principal, I will name it, I have held up systems that I am not proud of. I have done that, and I am re-inhabiting myself and my identity to make sure that I become a better person and name when I have done that. And I think one of the ways is that I thought I had to have all the answers. And when I showed up with our students and asked them what they thought, they brought so much brilliance and beauty into the place. And so what it reminds me of is how we can really lift student voices. Here we are looking at this gentleman using his voice to tell us we're getting it wrong. So how do we get it more right or get better? I think we ask our kids. And I think we create community where asking kids is the way forward, that we really engage them in choice about what we create with them, not for them. I'll stop there and pass it on to my brother and sister on the panel.
Y'all feel free to jump in.
Come on, Sister Liz, there you go.
We're just we're super polite. A lot of this resonated with me, and a lot of it brought me back to thinking about like my experience and identity as a student. And granted, I cannot tell you the things that were said or taught or that I learned in every grade, but I can absolutely tell you like which of my teachers made me feel seen and validated and powerful. And I can tell you the teachers who made me feel the exact opposite. And I think that is something that teachers and just anyone who is facing youth, we tend to forget how much power we wield and how we can shape how our students see themselves. I can pinpoint labeling myself as just not a math person to like very specific moments in sixth grade. My sixth grade math teacher made me cry twice in front of all of my classmates. And I remember being reprimanded for not understanding what was going on in class, like getting questions wrong. And I truly like didn't understand what we were doing. But at no point did she ever ask like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Or like, what isn't clicking for you? Like, how can we backtrack to like figure this out and figure out how to support you? I just got yelled at. I had to repeat Algebra 1 going from 8th to 9th grade. And that was seen at my school as such like a badge of shame. And just noticing how that self-internalization of like, I'm just not good at this because this one adult in my life made me feel like I wasn't good at it, followed me for such a long time, to the point where when I applied to grad school, like I went to UCLA. I love UCLA. It's an amazing program. But I would absolutely be lying if there wasn't a part of me that was like super happy that I didn't have to take the GRE to apply there, because I couldn't feel like I could face that quantitative part of that test. Like it gave me so much anxiety to think about. I was looking up grad schools where I wouldn't have to go through that testing process. And I was like 23 at that time. So like what had happened to me when I was like 12 still haunted me up until like, honestly, until I started teaching math and realized that I'm actually not bad at this. I just didn't thrive in in the way that it was taught to me, nor did I do well with teachers who engage with me in a particular way. This video made me think a lot about the difference between schooling and learning. And something that I've talked to my students a lot this year about is this concept of learning loss, and how like so many adults, especially ones who have no connection to education, are obsessed with learning loss. I did a Padlet with some of my kids to ask, like, what do you think about all these adults like weighing in on learning loss? And their responses were phenomenal. A lot of like, why are adults so obsessed with us? Like, this isn't even like this isn't even anything going on with you. And how could they say that when we've been learning all year? It's not like school hasn't been in session and we're just learning different things, that we're not sitting in rows and columns in class, like just regurgitating statistics and dates and things like that. We're learning about self-care. We're learning about, systems that we all exist in. And they've gotten a front row seat to everything that's happened over the past year and a half. This video has made me think about what it means to be successful. And for so long in my life, I had defined success so narrowly: getting good grades, getting into a good college. And then once you check those boxes, like, what do you have? Like, you've never been taught to think critically beyond just like academic success and excelling in a particular way. Something that I feel like might be like a little nitpicky about the video is noticing that a lot of the people he talked about who were dropouts, who were still, successful by different metrics, from my perspective, and I'm sure I might have missed it, but nearly all of them are white. And just thinking about how when we hold up examples like, Mark Zuckerberg and, Bill Gates, people who didn't finish school, knowing that the stigma for our students of color, that's just not the same thing. So hoping it can get to a point where we see different avenues for success. But I think the reality right now is that we're quite far from there.
What a beautiful analysis. Thank you so much for that. I think I want to build on that too, if that's okay, as a way of kind of responding. Like Zuckerberg and so many of those other folks, right? I think it's important to like know what kind of schooling experience they had. And I would press in this space to say, like, one of the significant shifts is like from the sort of banking model of like learning, which is like this cheap form of school. Like, you show up, someone puts some stuff in you, he called it bulimia, right? And then you forget. We have a system, a culture of like forgetting. It's like you get a commercialized, commodified learning experience in some way. I think moving toward a sort of model of learning that requires folks to grapple with questions and allowing young people to explore those questions together and bring their experience to that and bring their context to that, to me is a fundamental shift between the sort of banking depository learning experience and moving towards something that is much more equitable. And I want to like bang on something that Liz named too, and that was about like this difference between schooling and education. And the video identifies education as this thing by which, something inside of you is brought forth. I would argue like that is like one of the deepest forms of education. The Greeks describe it as paideia, that way of like looking within oneself and like realizing your gifts and talents for your broader community. So I would probably end with this, because I can talk about this stuff a lot. I love this stuff. And I would say two things. One is schools were not designed to maximize or to grow or cultivate deep relationship. The second thing is they were never designed to engage in the deepest forms of learning. So to me, if we think about what an opportunity is, it is one, all of us who join this wild profession, we espouse like how much it's about relationship. And you're right. And I wonder, as we think about the opportunities for what school could be and what school could be for, how would we design learning to maximize the deepest form of relationship with one another and engage in the deepest forms of learning, which does not just include knowledge and skills. That train is gone. Knowledge, skills, dispositions is frankly a key aspect, in my opinion, around the deepest forms of learning. Do you have a disposition of humility? Do you have a disposition of inquiry? Can you like use humor? To what extent are you able to engage and learn with and from other people, right? And pursue questions that matter. So when I think about like the deepest forms of learning, I think about relationship, I think about mastery of oneself and relationship with other folks. And I also think about identity and sacred purposes. School was not designed for that.
No, it was not. And what we want to do now is give a chance to really hear all your voices. And Michelle is going to help us go into some breakout rooms for a few minutes to kind of get your thoughts. What is it that's striking you when you see that video? What is it that you think we should be reshaping? This is an opportunity. There is a window of opportunity. What should we be reshaping? And we'll come back on that. We're also going to bring a student voice into this in just a bit. Or some of these other things that were mentioned as well. I think we all have some of those memories of things that we learned and how much do we use them and how much. I'm just going to lift up Dr. Norman for a minute. He talked about his experience and it's like, we remember things that we were taught, but what if some of those things that never got used were replaced with something so much more useful? How would that have changed some of who we are today, what we focus on today? So we've got some of those opportunities. I do want to bring one other video in just a minute that's from a student. Before we do that, let me just ask our panelists, y'all were in different rooms, but anything from your reactions to the chat or some of the conversations, something you want to lift up?
I just want to name, I appreciated that one of my colleagues, my peers in Breakout shared the idea of two things: recreating spaces. We don't need to think about school as the place it's been, and to create a new cognitive anchor that has an emotional tie. If we create spaces for community instead of spaces for separation, which is what schools have done, they have historically separated young people. Instead, if we create spaces that bring them together, both physically and emotionally, then we will set for them a new emotional and cognitive anchor that says this is what school is. It's about coming together, being together, and listening to each other. So we need to create the space for that physically and like structurally. And one of the teachers in my group, Miss Alicia, shared that she's doing that with time. Y'all are looking at time differently. And what time is the best time for learning? Well, we should be asking ourselves that. Is it that 6-hour block or could it look differently? And I think it could look differently. If we talk to our young people, they have a lot to say about that right now. So I just appreciated my group and the brilliance they dropped as we were chatting it up.
Yeah, Jay, if I could comment,
please.
I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to get out of that factory mindset of our schools. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and of course it's gone from agrarian to manufacturing to office buildings to high commercialized, and education, though the buildings and so forth where we teach our children over the last 100 years haven't changed hardly at all. You know, so we're still sending our children off to school each day to these places that we call school, and they're not really learning a whole lot. And they're not really contributing to, as I use the word, the body of knowledge, because they have something in them, as we all do. God has given us gifts, and we should be able to express those gifts. And I know certain students may have issues or problems or whatever, but still they have gifts, and we need to figure out better ways to get that done. And I think this is a pivotal time in the history of American education, well, in the world education, really, because the pandemic is worldwide. So I'm sure we're not the only ones that are discussing this issue. So it's a pivotal time for us to begin to look at whether we want to go back to business as usual, or whether we want to go forward using what we have learned over the past year and a half about how we can school our children in a different way.
I would love to, if I can offer just something in that vein there. Brother Jim is like on fire right now. He got my blood rolling. I'm reminded about one of the more important books I picked up some time ago, called The Book of Learning and Forgetting by Frank White. And I would offer, along with the critique of time and space, is the critique of the student's interest leading whatever the curricular experience might be. If we are educated folks and we know our content, we know our essential standards, our key competencies, our enduring understandings, our cross-cutting ideas, all the language we use, if we know this, if we know the thing, then how can we use the student's interest to explore and make sense of their community, their world, and bring in principles of physics and engineering and mathematics and art and expository writing? Whatever the element might be, it exists in the world, not just within the walls of the school. And so I would suggest, as we are bringing this really powerful critique around where does school happen, or maybe a better question is, where can learning happen in our community? A second question might be, how might we constitute time differently so that young folks aren't constantly interrupted, but they can actually inquire into something together? And then a third question about, well, what if we led with their interest? What young people come to us fascinated about the world? How do we build on that fascination and bring our professional lens to bear on the key learning outcomes? Thank you for that. It got me fired up a little bit. Sorry.
Thank you, Kaleb. You know, I just want to drop in one other piece, because I hear student voice over and over again. And ask Michelle if she can drop in our one other video. And this is a student in Hopewell who recently won a Poetry Out Loud competition on a very broad stage. And so, and this is just giving voice to sort of her experience. And I feel like this is important in what she says, as well as how do we actually create a space for our students to speak. So thank you, Michelle.
Being Black in America is. I'm a 17-year-old pure Black woman who lives in Virginia. A smooth girl who tries to speak my truth with charisma. A girl who doesn't know the weight of being Black in America. Being Black in America is scared to voice my opinion when oppressors are in my school system. Worried my fellow Black peers won't stand with me, but will stand with them. Being Black in America is systemic racism being regular routine, Black kings and queens not knowing where they come from, but hyping up a look they can never achieve. Being Black in America is being afraid. It takes a meeting, an investigation to fire a racist teacher, but a single no to silence my voice so no one can reach her. This needs to change. Being Black in America is aiding the school to prison pipeline to justify Black boys being incarcerated before they were born. Being Black in America is feeling frustrated. Always being labeled as the angry Black woman for speaking against inequality, laughed at in the face of the oppressed as if this were a comedy. I want to feel heard. I'm counting the Black bodies in the hallways, wondering if I'll never see them again. Bloodshed. I want to be a kid. Being Black in America is wanting to speak out. Being Black in America is having so much you want to say, but not knowing how to convey the feelings that you have. Being Black in America is being silent. Being Black in America is not wanting to be reduced to being just a slave. Being Black in America is realizing that not every Black boy can be saved. Being Black in America is beautifully broken. Being Black in America is
So we talk about lifting student voice, and we talk about having our students teach us something, tell us something. I mean, Ajane in senior year of high school, and she names things that are oppressive structures that, and I just kind of want to say that when we talk about going back to normal, normal is doing that is a choice. It's not a requirement. It's a choice. And if we choose to do that, then we are choosing to do all the things that come with that. And kind of going back to Liz, it's what's familiar. It's what's maybe easiest to do. But I think Dr. Norman said but this is a pivotal time. So if we were to make that pivot now, I just want to ask our panelists, if you had to say 3 things, I'm just coming up with the number 3, you can do plus or minus, but 3 things that you say fundamentally would need to change right now, and we choose differently from the way it's been before, what would those be? What would those 3 things be? I'm going to ask our audience too to kind of think along this line too, and to be able to chime in after our panelists are with them. So who'd like to start?
I'll go if that's okay. I want to try to be like as concrete as possible, because I love conversations around like centering student voice, but I feel like we don't actually talk about like when we concretize that, like what does it actually look like or sound like in practice? Like, yes, elevate student voice, but for people who actually don't know what that means or what it could look like if they haven't ever done that before, we have to be able to lead by example and like give those examples as well. So one thing, like to go from like abstract to more concrete, is like to be able to extend grace and center relationships. And like, what does that actually mean or look like? My therapist always talks about the importance of connection before correction. And I feel like in school, that never happens. Like we get so quick telling kids like what not to do, or like correcting their work or telling them what they messed up, but we don't bother making that correction first. So something that I shared in my breakout room earlier that I do is I try to avoid all academic content for the first week of school. It's just about relationships. It's just about getting to know each other, down to like, I don't decorate my classroom walls. I ask the kids what they want to have on the walls of our room, recognizing that families and parents and caregivers are partners in this work. They're not my enemy. They're someone I need to be working with. So like another practice that I do is within the first 2 days of school, I make a positive phone call home or email to every family in my class. And it can take a while, but if we have the ability to shape the direction of those relationships, we have to take advantage of that. So I guess that's like one thing. The second is to prioritize mental health for everyone. It has been great to see schools take COVID money to invest in more counselors, mental health resources, not just for students, but also for teachers too. I'm so grateful, like my school is far from perfect, but something I'm very grateful for is that our personal days that we get each year, they're just personal days. They're not designated for like sick, or if you're going to a wedding, like if you're out, you're just out. You don't have to justify why you're out. You just say you're out. And I think one thing, in order to, again, like going back to like the relationships with students and how we center our kids, something small but very concrete that I try to do in my practice and encourage other folks to do the same, is just to change the language and shift how we classify our students, because so often they come from places of deficits. If we talk about students being, you know, English language learners rather than like emergent bilinguals or multilingual students, like recognizing that as being such a gift, instead of having like knowledge that students have disabilities and immediately going to like, oh, like what can't they do? Like what extra thing am I going to have to do to support them, instead of recognizing them for like the brilliance that they have. So those are my three. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. And you're right. The ability to name sort of what's concrete about it is so important for, I mean, there may be more than one way to, I think you used the word concretize some of the ideas. There may be more than one way to do that, but we've got to know those concrete steps to make it reality so often. Thanks. Nikki, Kaleb. Kaleb, I think you said you're going next. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I know I can be very philosophical. So I'm going to kind of bring this all the way down as close to the concrete as possible and as close to the kids as possible. So I think what I would say is this. I would say start with a concrete practice. Start with what students are interested in the world. What are you curious about in the world? I think the second concrete thing to do is to organize, say, 2 to 3 teachers with a small cohort of students, say 50 to 60 max, and allow that small group of teachers with that small group of students to pursue whatever learning is important to them. That would be a cross-disciplinary team. The third thing to do, so that's 2, I think. So the third thing to do would be to design meaningful learning based upon the student's interest, tie in the essential elements around the standards, learning, etc., and create space for young people to engage in dialogue about their experiences. That's a democratic behavior. And I think if there's anything we're trying to do that maximizes relation, so this is where I'm getting philosophical, it's maximizing relationship, meaningful learning, and critical inquiry together to develop a public, a democratic group of people who can learn to live together and pursue questions together that are of import. So to me, I would name 3 things in summary. Start with the student's interest. Create a structure that allows 3 teachers to oversee a group of 50 to 60 students over the course of a semester or a year. Design the learning experience that connects their interest collectively with the key standards and create space that allows young people to engage in critical dialogue about their lived experiences. That's about it. I could go on, but I think I'm trying to lay out some very clear, succinct, concrete ideas.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaleb. And we don't want to pull you back from the philosophical either. You go there. You go
Yeah,
there.
but I gave him my teacher look, like, bring it to the concrete, dude. Come on now.
And I listen to Miss Nikki.
Awesome. So I really appreciate what both Liz and Kaleb have brought. And I think what I'm going to say is a different iteration of what they've already said. And I hope that's okay. We talked a lot about voice, and I think that one really concrete way to engage in student voice is to build community circles. There's an example on the Innovators playlist, and you can do that with students tomorrow. So that's one piece, just to name it, community circles. We're all at the same level. We're all sitting in chairs. The teacher sits in the chair. Yo, the school leader should show up in the circle too, sometimes with the kids, and sit in circle together. And there are different ways to start with light touches, like, you know, everyone, you have a talking piece and everyone shares a favorite X. But then we get deeper and we start talking about who is someone you admire. And then we get deeper. What has been the hardest thing for you this week? And then we get deeper. But as we do that, young people are able to speak about who they are and what they care about, and also listen. The practice of listening is really reinforced in community circles. It comes, like, the way I've engaged with it is through the restorative practices work that many of us have done it across our school districts. I have a strong belief in community circles, and we better be doing that with adults too. As school leaders, we need to set up ways where our adults are coming together in community circles. We don't show up with our grading for meetings. We show up and without grading on the table, we look each other, we sit in a circle. That's how we were at all the schools that I engage in. We sit in circle together and we engage together in a circle about our professional dilemmas, what's going on for us, and what we need to do next. So I hope that we can at least try that a few times. It's going to take a while to get into the flow, but once kids get in the flow, then they show up at my office. Nikki, we have to have a circle with so-and-so. They just need our support right now. And it's like the most beautiful thing to watch a sixth grader walk into your office and say, we got to have circle for so-and-so. I love that. And then when they all start talking about, we're going to talk about our feelings, and they walk in, we're talking about our feelings. Oh, this makes my heart sing. That's number one. Number two, take what Kaleb shared about building projects, because they're working with community problems to do work that matters. And I think if we're going to do that, we have to start with our own self and identity, who we are, what we bring, honor the brilliance and beauty of each young person, and start with identity projects. And if you do an identity project every year, that's beautiful, because our young people need to know who they are. They need to engage with themselves, who they want to be, and how they show up in the world. That's so important. And so we've done everything from like the 24-hour interview, where it's a 24-hour project. Projects usually don't happen in 24 hours, but a student interviews another student and they learn about them. They have special interview questions, and then they are interview buddies. And then they come the next day after they get work time to make something that honors that student. And then they introduce that student to the class. This is JoJo. I learned that JoJo really has an amazing grandmother who has cared for her since she was 1 year old and is like the most powerful force in her life. I also learned that JoJo loves to bake cinnamon rolls, and so I made this with a picture of grandma, cinnamon roll for JoJo, just an example. But my kids, they do that, and they do it in 24 hours, and it's beautiful honoring of identity and building community. And I believe that's the learning our kids need to be doing right now. And then this piece I wanted to give some specifics to the other way of what Zulay brought about giving the students a platform and what happened with Jaleel. We work from the space of Dr. Chris Emden and Cornelius Minor, and what they bring to us around getting students to speak, to tell us what to do, and engaging. There are a couple of ways. One is a student co-generative dialogue. Another is what we call the student educational cipher. But the point is that the kids have the authority in the room to tell us their feedback. They critique us about how we do. Tell me about how how I did today on that lesson. Here's what I wanted to do. What do you think I did well? What do you think I should do differently next time? And the kids, small groups, but they give us feedback. So sorry I talked so much, but 3, you said 3. I talked more than Kaleb. Uh-oh.
Whoa. Uh-oh. Yeah. There are so many ideas because these are choices and they are concrete things. And I just want to lift up Alicia Nelson's in here. She's one of our VSU students, and just to kind of name 2 concrete things, like, and Alicia, if you want to elaborate, absolutely. But I just want to kind of tee this up a bit. I mean, Alicia found that she had students who in 5th grade were caring for siblings and asked if they could do school at a different time, you know? And so she made that happen, you know? So, and did a project, if you will, or a series of days of questions and asked the kids, if you could redesign school for next year, how would you do that? And that actually is helping drive in our district some of the ideas as what things might look like next year. So how do we create that space to lift up our students, to center on our students, and to ask them so that this is designed with them along the way? I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Alicia. Sorry if I stole all that.
Yeah, of course I can share. Those who know me know I love to share. No, it was so cool when I first asked my students a few weeks ago, well, what do you think next year should look like? What should we do? They just kind of were taken aback and they were like, oh, I don't know. And so I had to really prod, which was strange for me because I was so used to them always having opinions. And the more I started prodding and getting their ideas, it was so cool to me because nothing shocked me, but at the same time, they were things that were incredibly specific. Like I had multiple students said they didn't want desks. Multiple students said they wanted a craft section. Multiple students said they wanted more time outside and to have outdoor learning. Like these are all things that like, that's what I want. That's definitely, you know, and anyone who's been in my classroom knows that I'm like the flexible seating queen. So I was like, yes, yeah, bring it on. And these kids had never had that opportunity to have me in that context. It was really cool to hear them, you know, say that those things are important to them. But I can't emphasize enough what a transition it was when I had, and I thank you, Miss Valentine, my principal is in here as well. And thank you, Dr. McLean, for giving me the freedom to allow some students to shift their time. We reevaluated time this year and it has been so powerful. And I've been able to connect with families and connect with kids in a way I never have before. And I mean, but I had to be given that freedom. And I think that's literally why we're here today is talking about how do we not go back to what we had before? How do we have the freedom to go beyond that? But that's enough.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. And from hearing the different ideas, I feel like there's how do we look differently within the structures that are typically there, and how do we recreate the structures themselves in response to what the needs and opportunities are. I want to make sure create space for questions that people may have. You've got our panelists here, and you know, anything kind of on the table. What questions would you have?
I have a question for Liz. Am I allowed to ask a question?
Of course.
I'm kind of a fangirl, so I figured it would be my opportunity. And I was wondering, Liz, if you could speak more to the mental health, the specifics and the concrete side of the mental health practices that you've seen work best with your students, and if any have worked also within the staff, the adult community.
Sure. So thank you for the question. This is something that I'm comfortable with. I'm not saying that everybody is, but I talk a lot about mental health and my own mental health with my students. Like my belief is that if I'm asking kids to be vulnerable with me, then I have to do that with them too. So I try to normalize talking about therapy all the time. I've tried to bring the counselors from school into my classroom so the kids know who the counselors are, because oftentimes they're not even aware that resources exist within our school, not just school-based counselors, but outside services that we can also connect kids and families to. When I was teaching elementary school, my graduate thesis work was around social emotional learning. It started off as one research project and quickly transformed into something else. But the focus was on teaching kids how to develop an emotional vocabulary. So like, can you because I found that this is when I was teaching first grade. So many students would come to me and say things like, Mrs. like, I feel bad. And it's like, okay, you have some negative emotion, but that is so unspecific. I can't really do anything with bad. But are you disappointed? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? And intentionally spending time in morning meeting every day, introducing like 2 new emotional vocabulary words. And we would do read alouds and talk about the way that like we thought characters were acting. And then we would try to, or the way that they were acting and feeling. And now a lot of the work that I do with my students in 6th grade is around nonviolent communication. So like this idea that everything that we do or say is a result of our feelings and needs either being met or not being met, but can you even name those feelings and needs to begin with? So the way that we create community in our classroom around like our classroom ethos is thinking about what are our needs as learners? How do we feel being in school? How do we feel about everything that we're doing in this space together? And what are our needs? And therefore, what can we then do to try to meet our needs and meet the needs of everyone else? This all takes place over like many like weeks and months and things like that, but that's like kind of the groundwork for like discussing mental health and just how we're feeling and trying to like destigmatize the topic as a whole. I found that when we like provide resources for students and families in terms of like connecting them to mental health resources, always making the note like these are also available to like educators as well. Like if you're a staff member in the building, isn't just for this part of our community, it's for everybody. So I think I just talked really fast. Hopefully that like gives some context.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I want to lift up a question I see in the chat from Dr. Walter for our panelists about thinking about schools around different or multiple intelligences of students. Anything sort of thoughts about that or response to that one?
I love that idea. And there are examples. So I'm the creative director at the Center for Love and Justice. One of the things we do there is we create new schools all around the country. One model that I would point to is the hip hop school in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is not the only one, but it's probably one of the older ones that really focused, it's 20 years old, that really focused on students who are, they call them opportunity youth. These were kids who were kicked out of the school, but they were dropping bars on the corner. So then they're like, oh, wait a minute. Yo, where's that genius coming from? Let's bring that back into the school. And young folks were like dropping poetry, analyzing their lives, talking about their communities, talking about their hopes and dreams and fears, talking about the things that they want to do in their lives, and also learning about the business of music, right? And so I lift that one example up. It's called HSRA, the High School for Recording Arts. My brother Tony Simmons is the executive director there who runs that joint. The point is like, that is one example of really like breaking the cast around a sort of Eurocentric, singular vision of what intelligence might look like. There are others, for example, in Denver, Colorado, where my sister named Ased Ali, she dope, yo. She created this school that's all about African dance. So they have girls who all they do is learn through dance. They learn about culture. They learn about history, art, mathematics, science, physics, all through dance, and then the business of dance. I got a brother down in Atlanta, this would be the last one. Brother in Atlanta who started a film school. He has history with working in the film industry. So he created a school that analyzes the world through cinematography, through theater, through video, and then they learn the business of that and all the things that go. So yes, I think when we start with the young people's interest, the whole world opens up about what's possible and the intelligences that we have yet to discover when we create space for that. So I love that proposition. And in Hopewell in particular, there is lots of curiosity and lots of possibility and ways to like start in small steps and move in that direction.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I believe if we truly believe that every child is gifted, that every child has this talent, then why aren't we focusing on that and using that voice, using their voice and what their talents are to determine what kinds of schools we have in the future and what we can use to bring out in them. If we use their talent to focus on school, you'll never have a dropout again because students will make sure that they finish the process of growing their own talent.
Absolutely. There are so many examples of this, particularly right there in Virginia, or actually right next door in North Carolina. There's a joint there called Sankofa Farms, where young folks work the land, right? In the same way that the kids are dropping bars on the corner, or the girls dancing in Denver, Colorado. Sankofa Farms does the same thing, and young people learn the trade and skill of like growing food and nurturing the soil and capturing carbon. They learn about the ecology. They learn about how to like fight food apartheid in these places, in their communities. They feed people, and then they learn about the business of it all. There are many, many examples of these kinds of schools that aren't school at all, but really deep forms of learning.
And Jay, I would just say that there are lots of opportunities for a public partnership, public-private partnership, when you do something like that, because the private sector will then support that industry that is very much in line with their future employers.
I just dropped a link in the chat called Changing the Subject. It's a book that's just released, but it's also a website. It's was funded by the WISE Prize because our founding principal and CEO at High Tech High was given the honor a year ago. And so these are a collection of projects that happened at High Tech High across all grade levels, K-12. And they're integrated. So you have this idea of multiple intelligences. These projects are cross-subject. We don't separate the subjects, we bring them together because that's how the real world experiences them, right? And so these are ways in which at least two teachers have come together to do work that matters with their students. And I'm talking about students walking from the border up 35 miles to experience this idea of dichotomies and the way in which they mapped the land and understood the land because they actually traveled it in a way to experience it, but also talked to folks along the way and then built a beautiful culminating experience for everyone to share what they learned about the land, about dichotomies, this idea of borders. So much to share, but that's one example that middle schoolers did. So I could go on, but if you want to check out some real cross-disciplinary projects, that's a space for it.
And the last thing that I would add to that is if we want the students to engage in those kind of learning experiences, we need to do the same thing for the adults because you can't intellectualize it for them. They don't get it. You know what I'm saying? Like we could talk about it, but unless you experience it, you don't really understand like what it feels like to struggle, what it feels like to like deliver something that's beautiful and that the community needs. And then you understand that, and then you must create that for young people. So I think there's a sort of parallel synchronicity around what the young folks we imagine that they're learning to look like. We got to do the same thing for the adults. What are the intelligences that the adults are bringing to the space? That's sexy.
Absolutely. That is an awesome way to cap us off there, Kaleb. Yeah, I just want to kind of bring us back, one, to thank everybody for being in the room, to thank our panelists for being here with us this evening. Lots of things to think about and kind of leave us back that returning to normal is a choice. And do we want to make that choice, or what other choices can we make that, to your words, center around our students, co-create what learning can be, and look at other opportunities. So I want to leave it with our hosts that we're so grateful for, Dr. Walter and Michelle, for being able to be a part of this. Leave it, if y'all have, Dr. Walter, any last words to end us. We thank you for being able to have this evening.
No, I just wanted to thank everyone, and I would say, you know, when you look at some of the work of Horace Mann, and one of the quotes that I really like that he left us with: education, but beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the condition of men, the balance wheel of societal machinery. We have it in our hands to, I think, make the choices for tomorrow to change the trajectory of so many of our communities. The real question is, do we have the courage? We got the knowledge, as Doc shared with us, Kaleb and Liz were talking. Maureen, I think it is clear that we have the knowledge. Nikki mentioned different people that have done the work, but how often are we lifting up that work? We keep on going back to these psychologists that are 30, 40 years old. Their work is irrelevant now when you look at today's society. But yet we still continue to lean on that, as opposed to some of the more recent research that says otherwise. And so for me, it's about us really just saying that we have the courage and that we'll work together in order to make some of this happen for our kids.
Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. Thank you, Michelle, as well.
Thanks, Jay.
Welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for sharing. This has been fantastic. And we have to continue this conversation.